Hello, this is S.K. Williams, and this is an unusual video since I am presenting it on Saturday. I typically take Saturday and Sunday off as days of rest, though I will put out religious videos, as they are called today, because those are the days I spend in meditation, prayer, study, and sharing videos on that topic with the world would be another way of honoring the purpose of the day. Which is why, when I do Bible videos, or did Bible videos years ago, which I intend to get back into, I felt no compunction about releasing some of them on Saturdays or Sundays. And I'm thinking about introducing spiritual reflections on Saturday or Sundays. But today, I've been thinking about something that I also think of as sacred, but not to the same degree. Freedom of speech. That's why this video is being released not on YouTube, but on BitChute. And perhaps, if I can get my account working again, Dailymotion. I'm not a heavily active video producer, and I might start being one, but there's no guarantee of that. There's no guarantee that my channel will ever pick up and take off. And I'm fine with that. But on BitChute, I actually feel that whether I sink or swim, whether I fly soaring through the heavens or crash to the ground, whether I succeed or fail, it is ultimately time, chance, and skill conspiring to make that happen. With a combination of my own native talents at speaking and making points, combined with my native talents on video making, which, admittedly, in terms of the video editing, is poor. And I will admit that lately some of my speaking has been poor as well. I've not been in the best of health. But I do think I speak well and make valid points when I'm trying to speak normally. My video editing isn't that great. But the point I'm making is this. On BitChute, and on Dailymotion to an extent, if I fail, it is simply because either I lack some sort of talent to make my videos stand out and people want to watch them, or I fail simply because of chance and circumstance. Perhaps I'm releasing my video at the wrong time, or perhaps people just don't notice them because of other videos, and maybe the bigger names are crowding me out. I think it's a bit of both, though. Time, chance, combined with skill and audience capture. Audience retention. But on YouTube, while I'm not saying that if what I'm about to say wasn't true, I would be the world's biggest YouTuber or even particularly big, but on YouTube, I get the sense that they deliberately don't promote me. And I have had confirmation of that in the form of the fact that they don't actively moderate the site with humans anymore. Granted, the site is huge and they probably couldn't. But at the same time, they're using artificial intelligence, or AI, which many have said is not an accurate name, but it is what we call it. And the artificial intelligence is programmed to work certain ways. And the algorithm that is used on YouTube changes periodically. After the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, it changed drastically. Virtually overnight. In fact, it may have been literally overnight. I found that in the past, when I used the name Donald Trump, they would often not show my videos. I would get threats and warnings because of divisive content, which is odd because I'm not a particularly political person. I'm not making videos saying that you should vote for Trump, he's great, and I'm also not someone making videos saying don't vote for Trump, vote Biden. Biden's great, Trump's bad. And I'm certainly not one who is promoting vitriolic language and hatred. If I just discuss the news, at the best, I would not be promoted on YouTube. But I would often get strikes for bizarre reasons. And the same thing would happen on the topics I actually spoke about on a normal basis as well. But we'll get to that in a moment. I'm just bringing that up to point out that I know what's going on because of the other things I talk about. For example, if I name certain names, like Adolf Hitler, or if I talk about anti-Semitism and Jews, even if I'm doing so in a neutral way simply to explore history, or if I'm talking about the origin and roots of these things, or even just condemning them, I am often slapped with warnings that my video contains hate speech. Keep in mind, I'm actually dating a Jewish woman. I am not anti-Semitic, and even if my relationship were to break down, I wouldn't blame her being Jewish. I have Jewish friends, and yes, I know there's the old stereotype of, I'm not racist, I have black friends, but my point here is that sometimes that is valid. I don't have a problem with people who are ethnically Jewish or religiously Jewish. Just like I don't really have a problem with Muslims, and I wouldn't have a problem with atheists if they didn't stop calling me a pedophile-supporting, child-abusing monster who goes around trying to create a real-life Handmaid's Tale and destroy American democracy and create a theocracy like Iran and Saudi Arabia only under Christian Sharia law. You're a dictator. And, of course, calling me an irrational idiot, in top of being immoral, and worship an evil god. If atheists would stop making fun of and ridiculing Christians and attacking them all the time, I really wouldn't have a problem with atheists. At the same time, I do make videos on religious topics. And a lot of them do talk about the atheists because they flood Christian channels. Often because one of the popular atheist YouTubers makes a video attacking another video with their sarcastic jokes and their endless ridicule and supposedly pointing out the flaws of their arguments, the logical fallacies they commit, and how evil and hateful the Christian is. And, of course, the people who watch the atheist video aren't content making fun of the person on the atheist channel, but will also go to the same channel and attack the same video. Atheists, for a group of people who like calling themselves free thinkers, tend to travel in herds and attack in packs. And I wouldn't normally be talking about that in a free speech video, except a lot of my videos talking about atheism also get stricken for hate speech. Keep in mind, atheist channels don't get hit this way. You can make a video saying there's no hate like Christian love, and YouTube will have no problem with it. You can talk about all Catholic clergy being pedophiles, and YouTube has no problem with it. You can say that it's not just Catholics that are pedophiles, all churches are, even Protestant ones, bringing up a recent scandal from someone that I can't remember his name, and I don't want to look it up in the news. I was never particularly a fan of his. Basically, every time a Christian clergyman is found out to be a pedophile, it proves that Christian clergy are pedophiles. And you can bring it up endlessly and say you can't trust your children in church, and any parent who does is a criminal, doing criminal negligence, and, oh, look at the pedophile churches, oh, they cover it up. You can do that, and you can get away with it. You can get away with accusing all Christians of committing genocide and talk about the residential schools in Canada, which, by the way, the churches which committed genocide and had mass graves, they never found those mass graves. You can talk about how Christianity destroyed the advanced cultural civilization of the Greeks and Romans and gave us the Dark Ages, 1,000 years of scientific stagnation, until it was broken by the Renaissance and Enlightenment, and how Christianity destroyed civilization, how Christianity is immoral and evil. You can make all those snide jokes about how ignoring facts is a Christian superpower, and talk about how irrational and idiotic and stupid and immoral Christians are all day long. You can say horrible things about Christians, and YouTube will allow your post to stay up. If, however, I respond in kind, pointing out that there are atheist pedophiles, and it's not just a pedophile who happened to merely lack belief in a god, but his mere lack of belief in a god had nothing to do with his pedophilia. We're talking about atheist activists who are pedophiles. And even their excuse that it's not about the pedophilia, it's about the cover-up in the church, doesn't work, because atheist organizations have covered up rape and even child rape. The Secular Student Alliance, as well as Recovering from Religion, for example, both had a man named Ray Moorhead working for them, who was raping his own stepchildren, and who had also molested another child. And when this was reported, they attacked his common-law wife, Sarah Moorhead, in an attempt to discredit her and to protect Ray Moorhead. And even when he went to jail, the mainstream media protected the atheist activist by simply not mentioning that Ray Moorhead was an atheist activist, even though he was one of the founders of the Reason Rally and was big in the secular community at the time. Not as big as the presenters are in terms of famous, but he was certainly among the movers and shakers behind the scenes, and was certainly part of the mechanisms that kept these groups running. If he had been a part of a church, the news media would not simply report on his arrest. They would have reported on him being part of a church. But because he was an atheist activist heavily involved in the secular movement, they simply reported that a man was arrested, without mentioning his atheist activism at all. The media is largely aligned with the atheist community, which is what makes it hilarious that they talk about Christian privilege. There is no Christian privilege. There's atheist privilege. Atheists today like presenting themselves as this persecuted minority when they really aren't. They weren't even a persecuted minority before the New Atheism began, even though that is now a myth that they like pointing out, that the New Atheism was necessary because of how persecuted atheists were and how they had to hide in the closet, when that really isn't the truth. And yes, I know about the Bible Belt and how violent and savage the Christians down there were. I lived there, and they weren't. There were no Christian lynch mobs who formed when we found out someone was an atheist, hanging them from the nearest tree. Atheists had no trouble finding work or jobs. It's simply a lie. But I can't say that, because if I did, on YouTube, my video very likely wouldn't go through, and I might even get a strike on my channel. The simple truth of the matter is, there is a hypocritical double standard involved, where the Christians have to toe a certain line, and their channels are monitored very, very, very closely. Whereas atheists can say what they want, because in our world, even if this is not entirely accurate, Christians are generally seen as right-wing, while atheists are seen as left-wing. And even though we tend to say religion and politics are separate, they really aren't. And also contrary to the belief. And by the way, I am not saying atheism is a religion, although I will be accused of saying that. In fact, I'll be accused of lying. I will be accused of saying, I'm not saying atheism is a religion, and then turning around and calling atheism a religion. My only option is to just accept that atheists are not religious, and atheism is the opposite of religion. But I'm not going to do that, because even though I agree that atheism is not a religion, Atheism is not the opposite of religion. Atheism is the opposite of theism. And the way we treat atheism as the opposite of religion, and atheists as the opposite of religious people, obscures the fact that in the modern world, people who call themselves atheists actually align with various organizations which they may or may not be formal members of, and have a shared belief system, and even call themselves like-minded individuals. Most of them are actually secular humanists. Even the ones like Alex O'Connor, who says he's not a humanist because he values animal life equally to human life, actually can't be distinguished from a secular humanist because all of his beliefs are secular humanist in nature. The fact that he doesn't like the term humanist applied to him because he values animal life equally to human life is irrelevant to the fact that there is no defining line that separates him from a humanist, since humanism does not require you to not value animal life. So, really, he's just a humanist who doesn't like the word humanist applied to him. And even if I would agree that he's not a humanist because of that trait, he still has everything in common with a humanist except that one point. And it's obvious that they're all growing from the same philosophical roots, and that they all have the same beliefs. And they are generally aligned with the left. Even the atheists we tend to think are right-wing or went right-wing, like the late Christopher Hitchens, really didn't become right-wing. What they mean is they supported George W. Bush in his war in the Middle East, which is not really the same thing as becoming right-wing. Christopher Hitchens was actually a communist and a Trotskyite who held up as a hero Che Guevara. In fact, a lot of the modern atheist movement is just Marxism repackaged, and it comes from the 19th century labor movement. I'm not joking. None of the arguments made by the new atheists were new. They were all just recycled from 19th century sources like Charles Bradlaugh and George Jacob Holyoake and Samuel Putnam. If you read 19th century or early 20th century works by these people, or others like Joseph McCabe or Carl Pearson, or even people like Bertrand Russell, you will see that they're making the same arguments. And it's not a matter of different individuals looking at the facts and drawing the same conclusion individually. It's obvious that they're influenced by each other, in part because they actually use the same language, which is a point they never actually like to address, but also because they'll often make the same mistakes. For example, many atheists now ask, ever since the popularity of The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, if God wanted to forgive us, why not just forgive us? Why would he have to send Jesus to die in order to be able to forgive us? Of course, Christians typically answer that question is because God is just, and he is, in addition to being loving, he is just, and his justice needs to be served. The problem is that that doesn't really answer the atheist question. But it's not the Christian's fault. The Christian is just not understanding the question. When the atheist asks, why would Jesus have to die, the Christian is only focusing on the Jesus dying part, and not really understanding that the atheist actually believes that God was in heaven looking at earth, wanting to forgive humanity, but lacked the ability to forgive humanity, and sent Jesus, and that Jesus' death on the cross gave God the ability to forgive us. And no Christian believes that. No Christian believes that God was unable to forgive us, so he sent Jesus to die on the cross, and that Jesus' death on the cross gave God the ability to forgive us. But you see that sort of thing all the time. And you see the same examples, like Santa Claus, and Tooth Fairy, and Harry Potter. And considering Harry Potter is no longer as popular as it used to be 20 years ago, it's weird that his name keeps cropping up, except that it is being popularly kept alive by the atheist cycle. And the reason I'm bringing all this up is because, again, to the hosts on YouTube or other tech companies, atheism is linked to the left politically, and Christianity is linked to the right. Now, those outside of the atheist community are much more aware of liberal churches and will often promote them as well. But the overall narrative is churches are on the religious right, they are conservative, and they are the enemy. The tech companies are less concerned about the religious issue. They are far more concerned with the political issue. They don't want you voting for Trump or supporting him. And they wanted you to vote for Biden until it became obvious that he was mentally impaired, and now they want you to vote Kamala Harris. I think they know that that's a failing battle, but they have to try anyway. Because they can simply never support Trump. They cannot go back to being neutral. And it's because they don't like conservatism or right-wing politics. Which is also why, even if they lose, they want to control the loss and have right-wing sources that aren't truly completely right, that are compromised with certain left-wing ideals, or that will compromise with the left. Ultimately, the large tech platforms are trying to manipulate society, and they're doing so with the hopes that they can reshape how people perceive things and how society would run, especially the young. This is why all of modern Hollywood started making woke movies, even though they were losing money. The hope was that, in fact, it wasn't even a hope. I should take that back. The belief was that we need entertainment. We need them to provide the entertainment. And to be fair, the human mind does need entertainment. We need distraction. We need things that help us organize our thoughts. That's why we dream. And having fictional stories or narratives help us. Now, we can overdo it. You shouldn't watch TV all day, for instance, unless you're sick or have a day off and just need to relax or something like that. You shouldn't just sit around watching TV. Now, since I have health issues, I sometimes do that myself, and I don't mean to sound like a hypocrite, but I have the excuse of not being able to do anything else. However, we need that. We need that sort of engagement of mind. That's why we read books. That's why we watch TV. That's why we tell stories in the first place. That's why we dream. At the same time, the media is right. What we consume as media will eventually shape how we view the world. What they're wrong about is that we need them to provide it, especially in the modern day with technology. People can make videos and share them online. And those videos can also influence other people. I'm making a video and putting it online. And now these channels on YouTube and other platforms are becoming big. So big that they are even crossing over with the mainstream media. People are beginning to talk about people like Mr. Beast in the same way they would talk about people like Tom Cruise. Especially when there's a scandal. Like there was with Mr. Beast and his transgender, now woman, formerly man friend who also was into child grooming. But therein lies the point. The old legacy media, the studio model, the television networks, they're losing power. And in this window of time, we allow independent creators to come out. The problem is that a lot of those independent creators have views that we don't like, because the original goal of making all these woke movies, the original goal at Lucasfilm and at Disney in general of making all their films promote the LGBTQIA 37 plus 4 Delta Quadrant 9 agenda. And the whole point of promoting things like Drag Queen Story Hour for children, the whole point of promoting this in their media was to normalize it in the minds of their audience. An audience they believed at the time, and I believe now they're beginning to understand isn't the case, needed them to give them entertainment. So they put every TV show now has the gay agenda in it. Every TV show now makes fun of conservatives. Every TV show makes fun of conservative Christians, or Christians in general, or religion in general. Because they understand religion the way most of society does, with atheists not being religious and some people not being religious, even though Everyone is religious. Their own belief system is dogma. And the overall belief was, if every TV show you watched, if every movie you watched, if every comic book you read, if every book you read, if you still read books, promoted the same view of the world, then you would begin to see the world that way. And the hope was that most, if not all, entertainment would be shaped around that narrative. Little companies like Pureflix might still not be, but they have far less cultural and social reach. And again, they were operating under the assumption that we need them to provide us this entertainment and we'll tune in simply because we have no choice. You see, if they only made one show or even one company went woke, then even if they're producing something we love, like Doctor Who, Star Trek, or Star Wars, we could flip it off, say it sucks now, and watch something else. But if our only alternatives to Doctor Who is Star Trek or Star Wars on TV, and if all three of them are woke, with the only possible difference being how woke they are, then the operational theory is we will watch something. So the only question is to what degree and what flavor of woke we're getting. But we will watch something, and gradually over time, we will be converted to that way of thinking. The problem, of course, is that people just tuned out of the legacy media and started going on the internet. Independent creators were often critical of the woke. Online reviewers gained tremendous following and influence by being critical of mainstream media. And now we are beginning to see more and more creators, I hope to be one myself, making my own stories. The tech companies are largely aligned with Hollywood, and therein lies the Achilles heel, however, of the current movement. Or at least, they hope it's an Achilles heel. In fact, the tech companies are largely buying up old Hollywood and propping it up. Hollywood is going broke, by the way. And what we see is a world in which people who are tired of woke media are creating their own media independently of the woke, but loading them to tech platforms that are in line with, if they don't directly own, the media companies that they are rejecting and creating alternatives to. Now that would just be an ironic twist if the tech companies, who are just as woke as Hollywood, and often the same companies as Hollywood, or at least owned by the same people as Hollywood, who decided to turn Hollywood into one big propaganda factory for the woke, also happened to destroy their own agenda by giving us a platform to make our own media, and that new media takes off on their own platforms. Except we forget the fact that they own those platforms as well. And as such, in order to continue their attempt at reshaping society, what we end up seeing is that they will use various methods, from subtle to gross, to silence the voices that oppose their agenda. They'll do so in a bit more of a clever fashion. They won't just outright start banning people who are anti-woke. But they will do things like shadow banning, where they don't actually remove your channel or your videos, but they don't promote them, so that if someone types into a search for a general topic, your video will never show up on the top of those listings. It might be several videos down, maybe 200 or 300 videos down. And that's the point. Because more than likely people won't watch them, or at least very few will. Even if what you're making a video on is relevant to the topic, is well made, and you're popular, your video might be buried. They will, of course, use a strike system, claiming your video has hate speech or some other community violation to give you a strike on your channel, even if you've said nothing hateful or remotely bad. And of course, they'll do the opposite. They will promote channels that are woke, not only by refusing to give them strikes, but allowing them to actually violate community guidelines with impunity, and by advertising them and making certain that they are on the top of the search list, even artificially. In this way, they can manipulate what videos you are likely to watch, thereby controlling the content that you consume and continuing to manipulate your mind, or at least that's the hope that they have. They also monitor the comment section, giving people 24-hour bans for hate speech. They do this on YouTube all the time. And the problem with doing this on YouTube is that it is applied so inconsistently. But the inconsistency reveals the scam. Again, if you're a left-winger who hates Trump, you can say basically whatever you want. If you're an atheist who hates Christianity, you can say whatever you want. If you're promoting outright communism, you can say whatever you want. But you will be banned if you're a right-wing conservative, or if you are a Christian, or if you say something that they don't like. Quite often, you can be less hateful than the people you're responding to and still get a 24-hour timeout because of your hate speech. They are trying to limit what we can say and the exposure we get so that they can continue to manipulate our minds whilst giving themselves a form of plausible deniability. Because they say, look, we didn't take down all your videos, they're here. Look, we still show this type of video. Look, we still have some comments out there that aren't in agreement with us. But they are targeting people, and they are trying to eliminate free speech, and they are trying to socially engineer our culture so that it works along their perverted lines. And we shouldn't forget that. We should keep that in mind, and we should complain. And we should start becoming active in resisting this discrimination. Because if we don't, then the very thing they warn us about with Trump will happen, but it won't happen with Trump. They talk about Trump being a dictator. They talk about Trump being a tyrant. They talk about Trump being a king. Because to them, a king, a tyrant, and a dictator are all the same thing. A king is above the law and can do what he wants. They talk about how if Trump gets to power, he'll punish political enemies. If Trump gets to power, he will destroy free speech. If Trump gets to power, minorities will lose rights. And in truth, that won't happen. But it will happen if they stay in power. The only difference is who they target. They've already used the justice system to attack Trump. And they use the justice system to attack other people who support Trump or that are conservative. And then they turn around and say if Trump gets into office, he will use the justice system to attack his enemies. And again, I'm not a super Trump fan. I don't care if you vote for Trump or not. The only reason I'm even bringing this up is because it's part of the problem. It isn't so much that I want you to vote for Trump. It is that people should be allowed to say you should vote for Trump without being banned. And that's the issue that we have. We have an issue with our freedom being taken away because we are more reliant than ever on tech companies, and those tech companies are not just providing us a service, they are controlling the content we are allowed to see, or at the very least manipulating what we can see. I don't have much else to say, so I'll sign off now. Thank you, God bless, and goodbye.